So in that sense, I'd probably answer your question by just saying actually, like the most important thing which you could do is just kind of have a little bit of a mindset shift, and specifically do three things: observe, reflect, and experiment. So, in this sense, you could just say, just begin to observe, bring awareness to the way which you're using your technology. And just, even if that means watching yourself spending hours on YouTube, that's fine. That's a really important first step. And not just watching yourself use it, but observe, how do you feel afterwards?
You were listening just then to today's guest on the podcast, Jonathan Garner. Jonathan is the founder of Mind Over Tech, a wellbeing and productivity company helping people to transform from distracted end users to intentional humans who make technology work for them. Mind Over Tech helps to uncover the impacts an unhealthy relationship with technology has on all aspects of our lives, from the mental and physical sides to productivity, creativity, and the quality of our work. In this episode, Jonathan's going to talk to us about the importance of intentional technology use as a route to psychological well-being and enhanced productivity. In addition, Jonathan's also going to talk to us about the most impactful people in the intentional technology space at the moment and the steps that you can take right now to create a better relationship with your digitised life. Remember, you can also see Jonathan and many other top speakers and companies at the upcoming Digital Wellness Festival in London. This will be an industry-shaping event where the likes of Google, Headspace, Moment, Budify, and Oxford University, amongst many others, come together to shape the future of global digital well-being right here in London. We'd love to see you there to be a part of this. But now, we've got a lot to get through this week, so I hope you enjoy listening to Jonathan Garner. Jonathan, welcome to Digital Mindfulness. It's a real pleasure to have you on the show today, and I'm really thrilled that you could make it here and to share your knowledge and wisdom with us. So welcome.
Thank you so much, Lawrence. Yeah, I'm very happy to be here.
Brilliant. Well, look, let's start with, why don't you just say a few words about yourself to the audience, and in particular, it would be great if you could just talk about your journey to starting Mind Over Tech and how you kind of came to be working in this fascinating space.
Yeah, so I guess about me, one thing is that I have a real kind of love and passion for digital technologies. So I've spent the last 10 years working as a freelance designer developer, building websites, working in user experience design as well. But also more specifically for the last 5 years, I've also done a lot of work in a freelance capacity for a company called Decoded. And for them, I've been designing and delivering workshops, which are really about demystifying a lot of the current disruptive technologies which exist. Things like machine learning or blockchain, but also methodologies like design thinking as well. And I've been really fortunate with them. I've got to travel all around the world and deliver trainings to companies like Visa, IBM, KPMG, Royal Bank of Scotland, and quite often at quite a high leadership or executive level. So this is just something which I'm always involved in and deeply passionate about. But I also have kind of another deep interest, and that's very much about the human mind and specifically meditation. And actually, that's been ever since I was kind of leaving school and I read a book. And it really kind of has been a big part of my life since then. I've been practicing meditation in the Buddhist tradition for over 15 years now. And I'm not a great meditator, but I do have an understanding of what it means now to have a non-distracted mind. So I guess these are kind of like two main pillars of my life. And around, I'd say about 3 years ago, I actually had a moment of kind of what I'd call like a personal crisis. So I actually began to feel really overwhelmed by the technology that I was using for my work. Or more specifically, I guess I could say I was being overwhelmed by my relationship with the technology. And this was from the obvious things like, going in to answer an email and then suddenly finding myself an hour later reading things like some obscure blog article, not having sent the email at all that I went in to do in the first place. Or it might be more subtle things like beginning to notice the way that I would habitually carry my phone around with me, diligently from room to room, even if I wasn't really using it, and the kind of levels of anxiety that I'd feel if it wasn't near me all of a sudden. And actually, the more I began to look into it in this way, I realized that I was actually constantly distracted. And of course, I'd go to hear people like Tristan Harris and later on saying things that, how Silicon Valley's created products which have made habituated distraction in the minds of their users. So it got to this point that I was really beginning to consider actually what other careers I could do and to actually just avoid this. But of course, it's not just me that's suffering from these problems. I quickly realized as I was kind of sharing my woes with family and friends that actually everybody has these problems and we just don't have the option of avoiding technology. So how Mind Over Tech came about is really just through this, starting to note my own observations, small experiments which I was doing myself to try and find ways that I could, redesign the relationship which I had with my technology. And just small things, like one of the first things I observed was that I wasn't even noticing when I was unlocking my phone. All of a sudden, I was suddenly in my Twitter feed without really realizing how I'd even got there. So actually, the very first thing I decided to do was just stick a big yellow Post-it note on the front of my phone, and I wrote the word intention on there. And this kind of did a couple of things, because the first thing is it brought immediate attention to me whenever I got my phone out of my pocket, which helped me notice those steps before I was already in my feed. But then I was also faced with this question, what is your intention right now? Jonathan, what's your intention? Are you going to send an important email? If so, that's great, go in and send that. But if not, then you're going to have to put that back in your pocket. And the thing is, actually, this simple thing really worked for me. Actually, in a short space of time, I found that I was just putting it back in my phone without unlocking it. But more than that, I was doing it kind of with this feeling of joy, because I'd really connected with the fact that I was no longer lost in my phone kind of against my will, but I was really deciding for myself how and when I would use it. So yeah, that's it really. And I guess people obviously saw me doing strange things like this, like putting Post-it notes on my phone, and began to ask me about it. And very quickly it became clear that actually some of these things I was experimenting with would become or could be helpful for anyone actually. So I started to give a few informal talks and run a few kind of workshops with friends, and it kind of all snowballed really.
So I'm really interested to know. I mean, we've spoken a lot about this this organization that you've created called Mind Over Tech. So it would be great if you can tell us exactly what Mind Over Tech is and why it's so important.
Sure. So, I mean, in a nutshell, what we do at Mind Over Tech is we run talks, workshops, and events. And specifically, we run them to educate people about the ways which poor digital habits impact their well-being. But not just their well-being, but also their creativity and their productivity. And then from those learnings, we help people to redesign their relationship with the technology they use, helping them to adopt habits which help them focus on what matters to them on any particular day. And at the moment, we're mainly doing this with businesses, although we are now starting to run some public sessions. So most recently, we're now running sessions through The Guardian. They've run a series of masterclass events. But a typical engagement, I guess, when we're working with a business would normally begin with one or two talks. So a keynote or a series within a company. Because the thing is, whilst almost anyone you speak to will immediately know what you're talking about when you raise these issues, actually they're not widely discussed within the workplace. And it's easy to understand why, because I guess just cagey culture, both in terms of employees, but also kind of managers as well. But actually what we found is that just by giving these talks, then it helps to, first of all, align people's understanding, but also kind of raises this desire to take action on a company level. And then after we do those talks, we kind of set the ground. Then we run a series of different workshops which go deeper into specific topics. So these are different things like using mindfulness tools to help manage your workplace distraction, how to create the conditions for deep and focused work, but also strategies for things like effective email use or other communications tools like the dreaded Slack, for example. So actually during these workshops that we run, we share a large number of different kind of tips and tricks and methods which people can use. And we've developed these as really nicely designed decks of cards, which people can kind of go through in interactive sessions and actually begin to pore over and have conversations around them. We've got over kind of 60 different kind of individual bits of advice. But then actually the main takeaway from these workshops is that each person during the workshop will create their own personal plan, which is taking kind of cherry picking some of these tips which really resonate with them and which they feel kind of address key issues which they're facing. And so then they basically have this personal plan at the end of the workshop, which they can start to apply immediately as soon as they leave. And we found that the benefits of these workshops to the clients that we're working with are huge. And just to name like a few of the different areas, you know, there's an obvious wellbeing benefit. It's giving people tools to deal with their stress and anxiety. It's helping them spend less time in that kind of fight or flight mode, which we kind of get engaged with when we're kind of a lot in conceptual thought a lot of the time. It's also giving people methods to help improve their quality of sleep. And also just to manage generally their time better, you know, this kind of work-life balance aspect. But I think as well with this well-being thing, there's like a deeper level where once people spend a bit of time with this, they also find that they're actually reconnecting more with their inner goals and purpose. It's kind of strange. It's like these very small things lead very quickly to something quite deep. And there's this kind of constant feedback that we get of people feeling more engaged and satisfied with the work they do. Off of the back of these kind of well-being benefits. And then just a couple of other things. It's like from an innovation point of view, I've run a lot of workshops in the past few years with different companies, kind of teaching around design thinking and things like this. And actually, one of the things with that is that you kind of need to create the space to have creative insight. And so often nowadays, we just literally ram every single minute of our day full of activity, full of more consuming information, and actually we leave very little space for us to actually have these kind of eureka moments. And so we found that these tools are actually a great kind of companion to these other kind of popular methodologies at the moment that kind of really help unlock the potential of them. Maybe one other thing as well just to mention is, yeah, like we spoke about deep work a little bit before, but another really clear benefit that we found that we offer is just people feeling that they can fulfill their potential at work a little bit more. You know, there's that kind of nothing worse than feeling like you spent the whole day just replying to people's emails, but, you know, not connecting with the real reason why you took a job on in the first place, to kind of get stuck into those meaty kind of creative problem solving challenges. So that's kind of like what we do and how it benefits people. And I'd actually just like to kind of mention a couple of things that we work really hard at Mind Over Tech to do to kind of create the environment to allow that to happen. So there's a couple of things. One of them is that we've really tried to base it heavily in a lot of research, looking into a lot of different areas. So the thing is, like, whilst this problem of digital distraction or kind of poor relationships with technology, while it might seem like they kind of originate from technology and that it's a technology problem, actually it's more than that. It's kind of a human problem, and so the solution will actually be a completely holistic one. So in relation to that, we've been kind of researching and bringing in learnings from lots of different disciplines, things like neuroscience, behavior change, cultural change, as well as meditation and other things as well. And in order to kind of really do justice to these things, we've also worked hard to build a really strong team of world-class facilitators, each of whom are actually experts in their own kind of quite specific fields. So just to give an example of a few people, we've got someone who's a neuroscience lecturer from UCL, for example. We have a lady who's currently an advisor to the Mindfulness Initiative. I'm not sure if you're aware of that. It's like a government think tank policy, looking at how to bring mindfulness in an innovative way into the business world. We have a consultant in intercultural and entrepreneurship training. And we've also got a lady who's worked to develop a really long-term online program of meditation study as well. So it's kind of all these really strong individuals with very specific skill sets, which when they come together, create something really special. And all of our sessions are facilitated by two people. So each one is a little bit unique as their specific kind of experience shines through. And then just the final thing that we're doing is just really spending a lot of time tweaking our workshop design. So we run a lot of these sessions, and we're constantly learning how to tweak them and be as effective as possible. We take a lot of feedback from every session and kind of regularly iterate that, observe what things were working and what weren't. And yeah, we found the combination of these things to be particularly effective.
I think it's really interesting. You were mentioning at many points in that last section there about the whole idea of intentional technology, so intentional use of technology. And for me, that's a really interesting concept because it's very much, as I see it, a knee-jerk reaction, or and it's like the antithesis to problematic technology use that's emerged. And I wonder if you could talk to that a little bit in terms of, I mean, you were mentioning the positive impact that the work you do has on the clients that you work with, but I wonder if you can just talk about some of the benefits that the audience might experience once they start to practice intentional technology use.
Well, I guess, we'll talk about intentional technology use in a second, but maybe first just by saying that actually anything which we do intentionally has a benefit, whether it's in the digital sphere or not. And I think we can all relate to this. It's the difference between wolfing down a meal or kind of savoring each individual bite, or simply noticing someone in the hallway and kind of holding a door for them. Being intentional means just bringing your full self in any given situation, and particularly like bringing yourself in a way which aligns with your values, and then kind of acts consciously from that place. So in this sense, intentionality in general is a very enriching thing. But to do this requires a real quality of attention and awareness. We need to be paying attention not only to what's going on around us, but also to our internal landscape, kind of emotionally as well. And when we're able to tune into all of those things, then everything kind of falls into place. And it may not feel like it sometimes, but actually we have a huge amount of control over our attention. We can choose to invest it wherever we like. It may take a little bit of effort, but when we do, this has kind of real and immediate consequences. As I said, it can be difficult to do this in daily life, but doing it within the digital sphere, when operating amongst emails and browser tabs and all these things, keeping that awareness and attention is actually incredibly difficult. But the benefits when we do are massive, and specifically, we feel connected. That feeling when you've watched, one too many YouTube videos, you just feel kind of strung out and a bit distant from yourself. This is literally through a lack of intention. You've watched things which are all very interesting, but at no point did you decide to do that. So at the end of it, you kind of feel like, you've been robbed or something, or you just feel disconnected from yourself. So I think, the intentional tech use can really help us stay connected with ourselves and feel connected in general. And I think, to come back to your point around as a response to bad tech use or maybe tech addiction, interestingly, there are lots of links being made at the moment about kind of deep feelings of connection and how they can help address addiction problems. Like, I'm sure you're aware of like Johan Hari's book, Lost Connections. This kind of goes quite deeply into this. So yeah, feeling connected is a huge benefit, but we also feel more satisfied. So, I mentioned this earlier, but that horrible feeling when you just spent the whole day answering kind of emails, like basically responding to other people's demands, and it can really destroy your sense of agency or erode your will. Going back to work the next day just might feel a bit much. But actually, when we're intentional, we can actually help kind of create some boundaries around this, and it's much easier to start to accomplish the things which matter most to us. Feel connected, satisfied. And I think the last thing I'd say is that it can really help us feel in control. Again, that feeling that there's just so much to do, so much out there to know, to catch up on, to be aware of, to keep engaged with. Again, as I said before, it's like you're constantly reacting to these external demands. But when you're intentional and you're setting your own boundaries, it really kind of puts you back in command. It puts you in control of things.
If you would counsel intentional technology use and almost an intention, living intentionally in general, what would that look like for the person that's got two phones, that's got double screens, lots of different browser tabs open, a Netflix subscription, etc.? What does intentional technology use actually look like? How would they actually practice that, would you say?
Well, one thing to say is that actually there's probably like a very simple definition that we could kind of give of intentional tech use, which may help to answer that. And I'd say it's kind of simply just using technology in a way which aligns with your priorities and your values and your goals, essentially. So if the way that you're using your tech is aligning with your inner values and is accomplishing things which you want to do, for me, this is intentional tech use. And in that sense, it's actually not so much about what does intentional tech use look like, but more like how does it feel? So like imagine, for example, that you're on a crowded commuter train. It's full of hundreds of people. They're all kind of buried deep in their phones. You've got two people sat next to each other. Both of them are there kind of playing Candy Crush on their phone, for example. One of those people is playing Candy Crush because that's what they always do on the train. They get it out. It's kind of like it helps them cope with it, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it's just there's no thought that's gone into it. It's just a habitual reaction to that situation. The other person next to them might have, on reflection, decided that although Candy Crush isn't great for them in large amounts, it's still something they really enjoy doing. And it can be the perfect way to kind of de-stress after work. So they've decided, like, I'm going to let myself use it for 30 minutes a day. And this is the perfect time that I've decided to use it. So in that sense, outwardly, both of those people look like exactly the same. But inwardly, how they feel and the process they've taken to get there, for me, that's what defines intentional tech usage. And it requires conscious thought and planning. This is the difficult part about it. We have to actually take time to stop and think about these things. And we need to kind of grow our ability to stay aware of our actions and our thoughts in any given situation. Because once we have that skill, then it helps us to be vigilant and to keep checking back. Is this technique aligning with my priorities, with my values, and with my goals?
I guess, through all of the work that you're doing and the people that you're collaborating with, the clients that you work with, who would you say is doing really good work in this space at the moment, in the I guess, intentional technology space?
Yeah. I mean, there's actually, maybe it's because we're in this space, so we're kind of quite aware, like, or maybe in tune with these things, but it feels like it's really booming at the moment, and there's so much great stuff out there. So maybe I'll just mention like a few people of particular note, like particularly in terms of people who are looking at how we readdress our use of technology. People like Cal Newport, obviously kind of his previous work, book Deep Work, but his kind of recent book Digital Minimalism, I think, is fantastic on this. It's very, very readable and kind of giving very, very practical things which you can apply. There's another book that I read recently called Make Time. This is by Jake Knapp and a guy called John Zaretsky. And when I read this, actually, I basically feel like someone's taken everything in my head, which feels like mind over tech, and put it into a practical kind of book form. It's amazing, so approachable. And another person, actually, I kind of came back into my awareness the other day is Joycelyn Kegley. Yeah, so she's got her book from the past, like Unsubscribe, which is around better email habits, but also her podcast Hurry Slowly. I'm sure a lot of your listeners will be familiar with that. There's a lot of fantastic stuff in there. So I think for me, in terms of people who are looking at how we how we change our habits when we use technology. These are all amazing people. And there's also another side to this, which is something which is a deep interest to me, and I would like to explore with Mind Over Tech more in the future, is really around actually from the people who design and build the technology. How can they do that in a way which is conscious of all of the impact of technology and is therefore more respectful of the person or the human who's actually kind of engaging with it? And actually, there's a lot of people in the UK that are really hot on this at the moment. Obviously, you know, Rohan Gunatilake, with his kind of mindfulness everywhere, I think is the name of his company. He's just doing some great stuff and been making some really interesting kind of digital products. There's a guy called Scott Riley as well. I think, I'm not sure if you know him or not, but he, end of last year or early this year, he's just released a book called Mindful Design, which is a great, it's a really good primer, basically, both not just in interaction design, but also in some kind of neuroscience concepts as well. It's a really good place, I think, for someone who's maybe building digital product, who wants to kind of be a bit more responsible about this. I'd say that's a great place to start. Also, Amber Case, I'd say, is probably quite a big inspiration. I mean, she's been talking about this for a very long time, more through kind of her framing of calm technology. Just a few of many people, but there's, as I said, I think there's so much great stuff out there at the moment.
Cool. So Jonathan, what is the one thing, if someone came to you now, say, I heard your show, what's the one thing you would say to me that I could be more intentional with technology and get some of the benefits that you've just been describing?
I mean, the thing is, in a way, there's so many things which you can do, or lots of very small things. As I said, we've kind of developed this list of over 60 different tips and tricks, all these things which we share. Just, you know, maybe just to kind of touch on a few of them, whether it's hacking things like the post-it note I mentioned on your screen, or doing something like going in and disabling your notifications on your phone, or establishing particular habits. So it might be blocking out time in your calendar specifically for the things which matter to you, rather than just having them in your mind and trying to fit them into the gaps in your calendar, like actually making space for them. Or setting specific times to check your emails, for example, and being quite strict about when you do and don't check your emails. Other forms of boundary change could be things like simply charging your phone outside of your bedroom at night time, or even just leaving your phone at home sometimes if you go out for a walk or a dinner with friends. Maybe you know, some people don't have a problem with doing that, but if you do, beginning to challenge yourself, beginning to push back against the areas which you find difficult. And I guess as well, there's loads of different technology out there and different apps which can actually really help with this. So, I mean, you've spoken to a lot of people on your podcast relating to this, but obviously there's the guys at Siempo. You know, this app is fantastic at helping you just reconnect with your intentions, and also kind of reducing the cognitive load of the interface of your phone. And also, I think you were speaking to Georgie recently from Space. You know, their app's a fantastic example of the benefit of having a third-party app to monitor your phone usage, because whilst this is now rolled into the OS of a lot of the phones out there, they're still quite tightly tied to the motivations of the companies which create them. Whereas apps specifically like Space, which are built to help you kind of create meaningful change, I think these are fantastic. But you know, ultimately, I say there's all these different things which you can do, but it's not really about actually specific ones being the right way of doing it, and it's not about doing them all at once either. It's really about finding the ones which work best for you and which fit with your individual needs. So in that sense, I'd probably answer your question by just saying, actually, like, the most important thing which you could do is just kind of have a little bit of a mindset shift, and specifically do three things: observe, reflect, and experiment. So, you know, in this sense, you could just say, just begin to observe, bring awareness to the way which you're using your technology. And just, even if that means watching yourself spending hours on YouTube, that's fine. That's a really important first step. And not just watching yourself use it, but observe, how do you feel afterwards. If you allow yourself to do that and observe actually the actual impact on you, this can be a really key kind of initial learning. And then from those observations, reflect on, how did I feel? Do I want that in my life? What could I do differently, which could help me still get what I want from these videos, but in a way which doesn't impact me in this really negative way? And then building from those observations and reflections, then experiment. Like this post-it note thing I spoke about, that was just me experimenting, just playing with different things which can help, again, push back and disrupt our poor digital habits, and start to kind of build and create new, more healthy digital habits. And I guess in that sense, it's really like, it's a very ongoing journey. It's like we don't get fit once. We don't go out and train and then that's it, and we're set for life. This is an ongoing practice which we need to build into our lives and maintain for the rest of our lives. And then we need to do it more and more in the future as technologies become more and more kind of entwined with not just our physical environment, but also increasingly our mental environment as well. So I'd say, observing, reflecting, and experimenting, finding these resources which help to support you do this as well. So people who you can discuss it with, groups. This is why the workshop situations are so great, because it allows you to kind of develop those critical thinking skills and really understand how you can meaningfully kind of apply these to your situation.
I think as we're all trying to rush to keep up to really not only understand the impacts of these technologies on us, but how we can live well whilst assimilating them into our lives. These are critically important. But I wonder if we could, just before, I think this is my last question, but I'm really interested to know, the whole name of your business is, the whole name of the organization is Mind Over Tech. And I wonder if we could just talk very briefly about the impact of technology on, not so much, on human well-being, but specifically on the mind as well. Because I know that this is something that perhaps we should have spoken about earlier, but it's of critical importance. And I think that, yes, a lot of people might roll their eyes, and certainly you can see online that there's a lot of hand-wringing about, taking your phone out of your room and not being distracted. But I think it's really important to understand why it's so important to start incorporating some of these practices.
Yeah. I think for me, there's kind of this thing which I often say, which is that really myself, and therefore Mind Over Tech as well, we really believe that our mind is really our greatest asset. As humans, this is kind of the key thing which defines us actually, and kind of brings meaning to us. And particularly nowadays, I feel like that's more and more urgent, essentially, or rather, it's more and more true. So actually, I think one of the great ways to really help understand how this impacts or benefits our mind is actually when we start to dig deeper into some of the neuroscience around this, and understand things like, let's take, for example, one concept like executive function, for example. Just to explain that really quickly, as we've evolved since being single-cell organisms through to the humans that we are today, and at every single stage on that journey, we have basically been perceiving stimuli in our environment and then reacting to them. So we might perceive heat and move towards that, or might perceive a loud noise and kind of retreat from that, for example. And this is what's referred to as the perception action cycle. And as we've evolved over the years, kind of into primates and then into humans, as humans, we've developed these much higher levels of cognitive function, commonly referred to as executive functions. So these allow us to do things like identify goals, also to stay on track with those goals, as well as kind of regulate ourselves emotionally, and yeah, do these kind of all these quite complex self-reflective tasks. And the way that these executive functions work is that they basically create a space or a gap in our perception action cycle. So, let's say, for example, when you're working away on something and your phone's next to you and then it vibrates loudly, our habitual response, our reaction would be to pick up the phone and to kind of and have a look at it. But maybe we want to stay focused, so our executive function kicks in. It creates this pause. It's like, no, that seems important, but right now you're meant to be working on this. Don't answer that right now, and continue. And that's just a small trivial example, but this is obviously at play all the time. But the thing is, our brain, just like our brain is a muscle, and just like any kind of muscle in our body, it needs glucose, it needs nourishment, and actually, when the executive functions are kind of challenged a lot in a short space of time, eventually they'll begin to shut down and then dump like a huge amount of cortisol out into the body, for example, which then activates your fight or flight response, and just kind of puts you in a state of anxiety. And this is fine every now and again, but what we find is kind of people actually just being in that state for almost like the whole day, essentially. And when you come to understand things like this, then you really begin to understand that, yes, our mind is our greatest asset and it can do incredible things, but actually it's something which we really need to take time to really care for and protect and safeguard it. And only when we're doing that can we actually really help it realize its full potential. And I guess that's the same for meditation as well. It's been my experience with that, like a lot of the time that we hear about mindfulness and meditation these days is all about the fact that it will make you feel happier or feel better in these. And it's true that there are lots of great kind of well-being benefits from this, but actually these are more kind of side effects of the meditation practice. They aren't just the pure point of doing meditation. Actually, really, meditation is about kind of being in a state of non-distraction, coming to observe and understand and know what's going on in your mind a little bit more, and then through that, therefore, also being able to again safeguard it, see when it's maybe going off track, and do things like this. So in that sense, I think that there's this kind of real, I think it's just happening outside of this anyway, but there's this kind of maybe zooming out to kind of broader world trends, there's this kind of like movement which is really demanding, or kind of like a hunger for reconnecting with these more fundamental qualities of us as humans, and these kind of mind qualities. And so for me, I think the impact of Mind Over Tech to really reconnect with that, or kind of take advantage of that, is starting off with what seemed like these kind of quite isolated or maybe even trivial kind of tips or things to do. But actually very quickly, it's all about coming back to yourself, being aware of what's going on around you, but internally with you as well. And therefore being able to, like, when through connecting with that, being able to basically fulfill your potential to its fullest.
That is a perfect way to end. I think that's a really excellent point. Jonathan, where can people find out more about you and your work and connect with you, and also about Mind Over Tech?
Website is mindovertech.com. There's lots of information on there. We have an events section as well. So, like, for example, we'll be running some workshops at your Digital Wellness Festival at the beginning of May. There's information about that on there, as well as other public kind of workshops that we're running. You can connect on Twitter at mindovertech, or send me an email directly, jonathan@mindovertech.com.
It's been a pleasure speaking with you, and it's been really fantastic to have you share your knowledge and your wisdom and your time with us. So thank you so much, and wish you all the very best for Mind Over Tech.
Thank you so much, Lawrence. It's been great.